Welcome to the library studio here as part of the Iowa blog. I'm your host, Craig Wynn. We're talking about an ongoing presentation about the nature and identity and the consequence of the Antichrist. It is a name actually that is picked up from texts that have no validity, the Christian New Testament, but the term actually works quite well. It not only is something that is readily identifiable with a wide cross section of people. Everyone has heard of the term the Antichrist. There's been a quest to identify who this individual is for a very long time. But the reason the term worked for us, even though we know there was no Jesus and therefore no Christ, therefore there can be no Antichrist in the sense of opposed to the myth of Jesus. That whole thing was Paul created in 52 CE by counterfeiting David, who's the actual Messiah and Son of God. But because the Christian New Testament and this individual is so anti-Dode, the actual Messiah, the term actually works. So that is why we're using it. The reason that we know the identity of this individual is the prophets were actually quite clear. The key ingredient in determining the identity is the realization that the prophets told us that Israel would be severed with its heart torn out and given to terrorists prior to Shavuot, which is fulfilled 7 years prior to Yahweh and Dode's return in year 6,000 Yah. 6,000 Yah is 2033. Subtract 7 years and you are 2026. Shavuot in 2026 is this 22nd of May of 2026. And that means that the forfeiture of the heart of Israel, thinning the nation at the waist so that it becomes indefensible, according to the prophet Yeshaya in the 17th chapter, must occur at this time. Now, the second thing that he says in the 18th chapter, still speaking on the same event, that was Wookiee showing that he is the boss and that Kara is just a little pipsqueak. For those that don't know, Kara is about this big and acts about this big, and Wookiee is about this big and acts about this big. And so, dogs will be dogs. They haven't quite figured out how to be best friends yet, although Asher and Kara seem to get along great. But Wookiee's sort of got his own special way about him. So we'll just see how long it takes Wookiee to warm up and figure out that she's a girl and that girls are cute and you have to treat girls nicely and not woof at them. What Yeshaya does, Isaiah, in the 18th chapter is he describes, using some 70 attributes, the identity and the nature of the great betrayer that forces Israel to capitulate its high ground, its heart. And that nation is no question about it. It's the United States of America, and the person is Donald Trump because it's being done over the next 8 months. And so it is obviously Donald Trump. So we knew that no matter what Donald Trump's rhetoric was, that he had to be the great betrayer, and that made him the Antichrist. But it doesn't stop there. Those attributes that describe the United States also describe Donald Trump. And then throughout the prophets, there are depictions of this person and their attitude, their sexual perversions, their propensity to lie, the enormity of their ego. We even read that he has goatish comb-over hair, that he's an old guy, that he is the copper con. No matter where we turn, we get a description that fits Donald Trump perfectly. And of course, Donald Trump is acting in the role ideally. He is a confabulator. Most of what he says is untrue. He only mixes in enough truth to his statements to make them appear credible if you're a complete ignoramus. He is exceedingly dictatorial, is exceedingly vindictive. He is obviously a rapist and a pedophile. He is everything that you would expect. He claims to be a peacemaker, and he is yet causing one consternation after another, nearly at war with Russia, nearly at war with Venezuela, hasn't solved any wars. In fact, there was no solution at all to the Israel war against Islamic terrorists in Gaza. The whole thing was nothing but trading hostages for a couple of thousand jihadists, and it didn't go any further than that. So we really have a mess on our hands, and it's clear that Donald Trump is the purveyor of this based upon everything that the prophets have had to say. So we have made our way through the book of Daniel. We've covered all of the 7th chapter, all of the 8th chapter of Daniel. Oh, yes, I was talking about you. You can come up here. There's the Wookiee. Wookiee does like iced tea, but this is iced tea with lemon, and he's not a fan of lemon, so I don't think he'll have much of this. No, see? That's not very good, is it? And iced tea doesn't taste quite as good after Wookiee has had his part off of the top. But nonetheless, we do what we must do. Got to keep the Wook happy. So we have gone through the 7th, 8th, and 9th chapters. We actually began with the 12th chapter of Daniel on previous programs, also that we would know the timing events of events. And that's the reason I went back to Daniel after having translated many, many years ago, is that we have learned so much over the intervening period that I thought that with that added knowledge, we would be able to unwrap the final riddles of this book and be able to provide an exact timeline of when everything was going to happen, and have a full disclosure on the identity of not only the great betrayer, this Antichrist individual being Donald Trump, but I've also identified the 10 individuals who are going to support him. I know exactly when he's going to arrive in Jerusalem, when he's going to declare that he is a God. And we've just gone through the entire process. And when what Donald Trump is essentially doing now in America affirms all of this, and he is establishing the Fourth Reich. Hitler had the third. The Holy Roman Empire was the second, and Imperial Rome was the first. So this will be the Fourth Reich. He's even got an Arc de Trump that he's going to establish for it. He has his own Goebbels and in place for his propaganda. He has his brown shirts in the U.S. National Guard, and he has his Gestapo in ICE. And so it's Stephen Miller, by the way, that is the individual that would be most like Goebbels. He's almost identical to him, both in stature and attitude and rhetoric. And so he's really got it all set up to be Der Fuhrer. This is his, instead of this, he's this. And it's every aspect of his life is a lie. And yet he has a devout following, as if he's almost a messianic character, just as was the case with Hitler. So we have gone through all of that and presented it to you in previous programs. If you haven't listened to it, I would encourage you to do so. We have now entered the 9th chapter of Daniel. It is a major screw up for those who want to believe that Daniel was a prophet. He got everything wrong in his introduction. He didn't say anything sensible until he quoted from Yirmiyahu. And so we've turned to Yirmiyahu to explain how he came to the conclusions, because all he did is read it and regurgitate what it said. And it might be a shock for people, but there are 8 books in the what's called the Tanakh, the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms, that were not inspired by Yahweh, that do not belong. The worst of them is Ezekiel. Ezekiel is literally Satan's playbook. Contains 25 ways to kill a Jew. The scenes in heaven are from Babylon, and they are clearly astrological. It has 2 grotesque rape scenes in the midst of it, and everything towards the end of the book with the Copper Khan out there, Bronze Boy out measuring this giant real estate development project that's going to cover all of what was Judea, not just Jerusalem, not just the Temple Mount, with a new monument to Satan's ego. it's just all there as proof that it's satanic, which means that there will be no, and there is no Valley of the Dry Bones. That is a fantasy. There is no Gog or Magog. There will be no Armageddon war. It's all a complete fantasy. So in doing this, one of the things I learned is that Daniel was not a prophecy, but that does not mean that there isn't prophecy in Daniel, because Daniel was visited by 3 prophets. They are Gabriel, Michael, and Elia, 2 of which are named, Gabriel and Michael, and both of them, by their names, identify who the individuals are that were actual prophets that met with Daniel. And all Daniel served as a stenographer. He wrote down what they had to say. So at this point, at the end of our show last night, I was sharing from Yirmiyah. I'm going to pick up in the 25th chapter of Yirmiyah. It reads, in the 13th year of Yahusha, Yahweh heals, the son of Ammon, supportive king of Yehudah, which means beloved of Yah. And to this day, for 23 years, it's interesting, I began this review after 23 years of serving in a collaborative mission with Yahweh. And so for 23 years, the word of Yahweh, which is how long I had been studying the word of Yahweh, has been with me. And I have spoken to you early on, repetitively and persistently, conveying the word, but you have not listened. So I'm going to view that as both it was true then and it is true now, because I have spoken to Yehudah, to Jews, and to this day for 23 years, and conveying the word of Yahweh. It has been with me every step of the way. And as I have spoken to you early, repetitively, persistently, conveying the word, you have not listened. Yahweh has sent to you all of his associates and co-workers, the prophets. Yahweh has a very short list of people he has chosen to work with. Of major players in his story, there really are 4. If you go back all the way to the beginning and you list the important contributors, you'll know that there's some people whose lives Yahweh spoke a lot about, but they didn't have much to say that we can use to grow from. All we can do is learn life lessons from what they did right and what they did wrong. The case would be with Abraham, for example. We start all the way back at the beginning with Adam and Chava. I've done 2 shows now on them recently, plus a number in the past, and it's astonishing what we can learn from that episode as to the relationship that Yahweh had with Adam, how Chava was created for Adam, not for Yahweh. Chava and Yahweh did not have a relationship. It was Chava who was susceptible to Hasatan, and it is apparent in that conversation that she wanted to be a goddess, and that she was willing to twist the words of Yahweh, his instructions, to achieve that purpose. And then she immediately corrupted the one who she thought would support her in this decision, and we ended up with a perfect prophecy to explain some of the harassment that I have received recently from a similar woman. And you go from there to the story of Noach, and you find that while he didn't have much to say, we can learn from him because of the fact that Noach was chosen because he had walked away from religion and politics. He was living on his own, away from the population centers and their inappropriate behavior, religious and political behavior that caused God to be opposed to them. There was Nephal, which was bowing down and prostrating oneself religiously, and there was Hamas, which is gross violence in the land. He was not part of that, and what we are told is that he listened to Yahweh and did as Yahweh asked, and that's why he and his family were saved. So we can learn from that. We can also learn a great deal from the way that the ark was constructed. And then moving on from there, we have Abraham and Chawah. We learned that they also became available for God to work with because they had walked away from Babylon. It's a huge insight into God's preference. He's not going to engage with anybody who is religious or political. So the first step in forming a relationship with God is walking away, disavow religious and political influences in your life. And it's only then that God can introduce himself to you and that you can come to get to know him. And again, laid out an entire narrative over 7 meetings with Abraham. And over that time, they developed a relationship, and then Abraham had a chance to prove the validity of that relationship and how the benefits of that covenant would be delivered when he took Yishak up Mount Moriah, and that collectively they performed a dress rehearsal for the fulfillment of Passover, 2000 or 40 Yobel thereafter. So it's a marvelous story. And Abraham, who did and said a lot of really inappropriate things, is still called a prophet because the dress rehearsal for Passover was prophetic. And, we move through his situation with Ishmael, which was so horrendous, and then into Yishak, which means laughter. A significant player, but not much from him that you can say, well, that is a life lesson that we can apply. The same thing would be true with his sons, Esau and Jacob. One was cheated out of his birthright and the other usurped it, and yet he made many, many decisions in his life that seem wholly inappropriate. But nonetheless, he would give birth to the 12 children of the 12 sons that became the tribes of Israel, and thereafter they were off to no good. So there's lots of life lessons there. There isn't a situation where Yahweh is either speaking through those people or where those people are saying, all right, I know what God said previously, and I'm here to interpret it for you and apply it so that you can make it an important part of your life. Now, that really doesn't happen until we meet Moshe, who's one of the great players in God's story. And in the case of Moshe, he's an individual that had the courage to stand up against the taskmaster, to protect his people. He had the wherewithal and the courage to walk away from the lavish lifestyle that he was living in Pharaoh's family. Had the wherewithal to stand up against bandits that were harassing some women when he was, getting fairly advanced in age. He had the wherewithal and the courage to go back into Mitzrayim, knowing that the Pharaoh would want to kill him for his previous acts. And you'd have to be tough as nails to lead the children of Israel because they were so irascible. So you had to be a pretty tough hombre to endure all of that. And so we learn a lot from him because of Devarim when he is speaking for Yahweh. And, you go through and you meet Dod, who is the most important character in God's story. But the fact of the matter is that there aren't a lot of them. And when God picks somebody that he's going to work through, he goes out of his way to tell you in every possible way, this is the individual I picked. You need to pay attention to them. And he even tells you the time that they're going to appear and uses a whole lot of very descriptive titles and adjectives to depict these individuals. So God has sent to you all of his associates and co-workers and the prophets, sending them from the beginning. And yet you have not listened. And that's true. Israel has never listened to anyone who has spoken for God, nor have they listened to God directly. When God spoke to them briefly during the Exodus, they told him to shut up and go away. And so Israel has never listened to God, ever. They listen to rabbis. They pretend that they have an active relationship with the Hashem, but Hashem's not Yahweh. Um, the theme of the prophets is consistent all the way through. Israel, you have not listened. And that's deeply disturbing. So it says, and yet you have not listened, nor have you so much as extended your ear to hear them, saying, of your own initiative, please return now, each individual, from going the wrong way and from your immoral and improper practices. Israel just continues to double down on nonsense. The religion of Judaism has gotten to be nonsense piled on top of stupid, on top of imbecilic, on top of dunderheadedness. It is just a pile of goo, and it just gets worse and worse. You hear them make a presentation of what something represents in Judaism, and you just want to scream and say, you're supposed to be bright people. How in the world can you believe something this stupid? And they do. They have a religious ritual for the dumbest notions in the world. And they continue to double down on immoral and improper practices, irritating God. And no one is taking the initiative to return to God. And so this is prophetic. It was true then. It is truer now. That even when God says, listen, Yisrael, Yahweh is your God is one. They don't listen to him. They've turned it into a prayer, so they yabber, and then they replace his name. I mean, you couldn't be any more obnoxious than that. Now, the whole story of the Exodus, you have all these Jews that prayed around, and they take the Torah and a scroll, very hard to read, of course, when it's in a scroll like that, and then they put it in a blankie. They put then it inside of this jeweled container as they're dressing it up like a whore. They kiss it and frolic all around their synagogues with it. And yet the Torah says that they're reprehensible. The Torah doesn't speak kindly of Jews. It denounces them. And it denounces them for who they are: irascible, pig-headed, stiff-necked, abusive towards God. I mean, they were so obnoxious. Moshe said to God, you just should kill me now, because this job is impossible. I'm miserable. These people are impossible. I can't do this job. It cannot be done. And God agreed with him. So the Torah does not speak highly of Jews. The Torah is filled with God saying, you're full of it. You're obnoxious. And so they don't hear. And no one is taking the initiative to shub. And that's the key thing. Until Jews shub, return to God, God's not returning to them. And he is right now nowhere to be found anywhere near Israel. And he is not going to return to Israel until the waning days in year 2033, which is year 6,000, beginning on Teruah. Then you can choose to live and remain. Once you do this, Israel, once you return, once you start listening, and this is going to happen for the final remnant of Israel, during Teruah in year 6,000, the 23rd and 24th of September of that year, to a full solar eclipse, which is going to set it off quite nicely. There'll be the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah. There'll be the purging of the adulterous woman, and the days that follow, Dod and Yahweh will return, and then we will see the earth transformed as all traces of religion and politics are excoriated from the earth, and we enter the Garden of Eden. So you can choose to return and remain on this ground, which to enjoy the benefits of the relationship Yahweh has given you and to your fathers of old by way of the restoring witness and forevermore. Therefore, you should not continually chase after other gods. No Hashem, no Adonai, no Jesus Christ, no Bar Kokhba, no G-D, no Allah. Just stop it. And Jews might say, well, we're just using Hashem as a placeholder for Yahweh's name, though they will never say Yahweh's name. And it's just G-D as a title, but the moment that you won't say it, you're inferring that it's actually a name when it is not. It's just a title. But the fact is that rabbis created the myth of Jesus, a false god. Paul was the first person to declare that he was a rabbi, said he was the best of them. And the fact is that rabbis sold Talmud stories to Muhammad, which made the Quran appear religious. And the only reason Islam exists and the Quran exists today is because of rabbis selling Muhammad those Talmud stories, which he twisted and then pretended they came from Allah. So the false gods of Jesus Christ and Allah, as well as Hashem, are all directly attributable to Jews and Judaism. Therefore, you should not continually chase after other gods, serving them, neither bowing down and worshiping them, nor speaking for them. God doesn't want to be worshiped. And so since he doesn't want to be worshiped, can you imagine how annoyed he is when Jews bounce around and bow their heads and bang them against a stone wall and go through all of these prayers? I mean, it's just utterly obnoxious. And they do it for a false god. Do not habitually provoke and grieve me. And I post every day on Facebook at least 5 to 10 pictures of Jews being obnoxious and grieving God. And if you are a religious Jew, you are provoking and angering God. With the product of your hands, then I will not distress or trouble you. If you don't trouble God, he is not going to trouble you. However, you have not listened to me, declares Yahweh. So now Yahweh is intervening here and speaking in first person. It's a name that Jews will not pronounce. It's a name that Christians will not pronounce. It's God's one and only name. If you don't know it, you don't use it, you do not know him. You are lying when you say that you have a relationship with God when you do not use God's name. That's just a statement of fact. And by negating the value of God's name, Yahweh, you have written an express ticket to Sheol, because that is an unforgivable crime. A lot of people do it, and yet it is an unforgivable crime. If you are calling God any other name but Yahweh, Jesus Christ, Allah, the Lord, G-D, Hashem, you are negating the value of Yahweh's name. The third statement etched in stone says exactly that negating his name is unforgivable. Forever. So therefore, you have provoked me. That's nothing you can do that make God matter. With the work of your hands, doing so to your own detriment, bringing misery upon yourselves. Most people don't know, but the second statement that God etched in stone presents 4 or 5 different ways that God is saying, I don't want you to be religious. I don't want you to be seen around religious imagery. I don't want you to make religious symbols like Stars of David's, like crucifixes, for example. They wear the yarmulke as a religious symbol. They wear the phylacteries, the boxes, as religious symbols. They wear the tzitzit as religious symbols. God says, don't do that. I don't want to see you with religious symbols in the work of your hands. You are doing nothing but provoking me. They hold their lavav, their 4 species, up with the wrinkled fruit. That is something they've put together with their hands that is doing nothing but provoking God. They twirl a chicken over their head, or the new interpretation, they twirl money over their head. I guess chickens scream and poop and scratch. And they switched from chickens to money, which was good for the chickens, I guess. But there's still a lot of chicken twirlers. God says what you're doing with your hands is just repulsive. You're provoking me, and you're doing it to your own detriment. You're bringing misery upon yourselves. And so this entire land will become depopulated and deserted. And yes, it has been, and it will be. The next 8 years are going to be devastating. Once Muslims are afforded a Islamic State in the heart of Israel, and it becomes obvious that Israel lost the last version of Alaska Flood. Alaska Flood 2.0 is going to be 1,000 times worse. And Muslims are going to come from the inside out, from the outside in. They're going to come in as jihadis in sneakers. And they're going to be rapists, and they're going to be plunderers, and they're being arsonists. And They're going to be abductors, but they're also going to bring a much greater barrage of missiles into Israel's most populated cities, and they're going to turn them to rubble. And so Israel is going to be depopulated and to a very significant extent. God is speaking on the order of 10 million Jews dying over this next 8 years. And he's not going to kill them. They're going to die because of Israel's ignorance, Israel's unwillingness to accept the fact that Islam has perpetrated genocide on Jews for 14 centuries, and they continue to make deals with the devil, thinking that that's going to work out for them. And then with the prophet saying, don't trust Trump, they've presented him as the second coming of Cyrus. He's more popular in Israel than any other country in the world, and he is betraying Israel. It's just total ignorance that has put Israel in this position. God says it's going to happen to you. You brought it on yourself. The only silver lining in the whole thing is that when it's obvious that the IDF will fail again, the politicians will have failed again, and the rabbis will continue to be useless, that there will be a reasonable number of Jews who turn away from all of them and become receptive to Yahweh. And in the end, God's going to save a remnant of them. And so this entire land will be depopulated and deserted, wasting away. And because of what they have become, they will be reduced to servitude by Goy Melech Babel, the Gentile king of confusion. The Gentile king of confusion, the Gentile king of Babel, the dictator who is a Gentile who blabbers all over the place and constantly intermixes truth and lies. That's that same fellow I've been telling you about, Donald J. Trump. Donald J. Trump is the ultimate confabulator. There's very little correlation between what he believes and what he says in reality. And he only mixes in enough truth into his concoction of lies to give his lies just enough credibility to fool the moronic, which they call today MAGA, I think is the term that is used to, isn't that the current definition of moron?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it is. And that's saying something because Marxists are not very smart people and they're on the other side. In fact, they're dunderheads. They've lost all ability to reason. Goyim Melech Babel, Donald Trump. And you say, wait a minute, we're not reduced to servitude. Who are you kidding here? Israel is a vassal of Donald Trump. Donald Trump says, stop fighting. You stop fighting. Donald Trump says, come here, heal. You come there and heal. If Donald Trump says, beg for this, you beg for it. Donald Trump says, I want you to apologize to the Qataris for trying to kill Hamas terrorists. You grovel and you do what he says. If he says, I want a Palestinian state, you're going to give him a Palestinian state. You have been reduced to servitude. You are a vassal of the Goy Melech of Babel, Donald J. Trump. I like it when the prophets are right. I enjoy sharing insights from the prophets. Now, the fact of the matter is that no one has ever put that connection together, but it's obvious. For the first time since the Romans, Israel is a vassal. And you're a vassal of Donald Trump. You put yourself in that position because by plundering and destroying Gaza, being played by the Muslims, that's why the Muslims went into southern Israel and were so savage. They wanted to make certain that they could be, and we've seen Sinwar's letter, the entire purpose was to be savage. The purpose was not to conquer or occupy Israel. That was not the purpose. He made the purpose very clear in his letter, and you've now read his letter and you still can't figure it out. It was to be so obnoxious, so ruthless that Israel would lose its mind and not think it through and go in and invade Gaza and destroy Gaza and kill lots of Muslims in Gaza, which would absolutely, unequivocally isolate Israel from the rest of the world, turn Israel into a pariah country where Israel has now one friend in the world. One. And that friend is the Antichrist. The Goy Melech Babel. Even Americans are smart enough to say no kings today, but not Israel. You did this to yourself. You put yourself in this position where you become a vassal to Donald J. Trump. All right, so when we read through that, what we find that the approach that Daniel took to understanding is actually much easier for us today because we have much more information to make these deductions. Like Daniel would have no idea that the Torahless one, the Goyim Melech Babel would be Donald Trump, but we do. So the information at Daniel's disposal may have included Dode's eyewitness accounts of his fulfillment of the first three Moed through the Mizmor, the Psalms 22 and 88. He may have read Yahweh's marvelous portrayal of Dode's return and of Dode's three lives in the 2nd and 89th Psalms. He may have used Hosea and Shamuel as stepping stones, connecting the past with the future and taking that forward in time to see how Dode was ultimately going to become Israel's savior, Messiah, and king. Just as these things now have materialized. And clearly, he would have been a student of the Torah, which would have enabled him to connect the dots between the initiation of the Mikra and their fulfillments as chronicled in Yeshayah, as well as the aforementioned Yirmiyah. All of those books were written prior to the children of Israel ending up in Babylon. In fact, the time stamp on this discussion that we're going to pursue is 555 BCE. And these other books were written in the 7th and 8th century BCE. Also, by contemplating the genealogies that are presented in the Torah, combined with the history of the Israelite kings, it's possible to ascertain when the exit from Eden occurred. So he might have known that, as well as when Abraham and Yahweh affirmed the Bereth, the covenant, and on Mount Moriah. Also, he could have deduced the timing of the Yatzah at they wouldn't have used BCE as dates, but he would have known it from his own time. When he would have also known when Dode unified Yisrael, that happened to be year 3000 Yah, in the years prior to 3000 Yah. And from there, it would have been an easy extrapolation to years 4000 and 6000 Yah. You know, I've been able to do that. I'm not sure he had enough information or the aptitude to do it, but some of the material, much of the material was there, and I think it could have been done. Now, using the data presented in this chapter, Gabriel, God's most competent and capable, courageous and combative man, is somebody that we can readily determine that he is the Pesach Yael. He is the one whose soul fulfilled matzah. And it says we will know when he was scheduled to walk into Jerusalem from Bethlehem to fulfill Pesach in year 4000 Yah, and when he accomplished the fulfillment of Chag Matzah through the 7th day of the Mikra. But why stop there? The means to time future is easily extrapolated from 33 CE, 40 Yobel, which 2,000 years brings us to 2033, and coincides with year 6,000 Yah. And he clearly would have known years 2,000, 4,000, and 6,000 Yah, which is the time of Yahweh's return with Dode. So all one really has to do to know the exact moment that these much anticipated events will materialize is to consider the timing of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim in year 33 CE, because that defines the resulting timing of Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah in 2033. And it gets us to one of two dates for fulfilling Shabuah, either May 22nd, 2026, which is 7 years prior to Yahweh and Dod's return in 2033, or it's June 11th in 2027 for reasons that we have previously deduced based upon the number of days working backward from Teruah that we have been told. And both dates actually have merit, because I think the first date is when the terrorist state is going to be cut out of and imposed upon Israel. That's Fakistinian state, this final solution, if you will, to the Jewish problem. May 22nd, 2026 is the timing for that. And then June 11th, 2027 is the likely timing for the Shabuah harvest. So looking back in time to year 4000 Yah in 33 CE, Passover was observed beginning on sunset. It was a Thursday, April 3rd on the Julian calendar. Dod's return will therefore be on a Sunday at sundown, 6:22 p.m. in Jerusalem on the 2nd of October. 5 days later, we will celebrate the millennial Shabbat, which will commence on the Shabbat at sunset, Friday, October 7th, 2033, to a full lunar eclipse. The Islamic terrorist raid into Israel on October 7th, 2023, now 2 years ago, set the stage for what will become the time of Jacob's troubles, which is Israel's troubles, although this was just the start of the birth pang. So you'll be ready and not surprised when the main event materializes. The situation will deteriorate further as we approach Shabuah and 2026 and 2027. And then the worst of it will come upon Israel between the January 29th and March 15th, when the Torahless one, Donald Trump, will arrive in Jerusalem during Ramadan. And on the Ides of March, the 15th of March in 2030, is when he's going to proclaim that he, as Satan, is in fact God. Well, not in fact God, but that's the claim that he in fact will make. And the two witnesses, Elia and also Yada, will arrive on Pesach, Passover, the 18th of April, 2030. This will be after the Passover meal, though. This will be the day of Passover as opposed to the evening. Now, based upon what we have already discerned from Dod's revelations, as well as current events, the peace accord, which catapults the devil's advocate into worldwide fame and such that he is credited and seen as a hero, which is necessary for him to be the great betrayer. That individual is demonic Donald Trump. And it is going to metastasize over the next 8 months. Immediately thereafter, Israel's situation will worsen and continue to be horrendous over the next 2,300 days. Then, in the midst of that time, on March 15th, 2030, the great abomination will be pronounced with Satan's stooge, the corporeal manifestation of the adversary seeking to be worshipped as if he were God in Jerusalem, which won't be a significant step from where he really is right now, is it? It appears as if Daniel wanted to know what issues could be resolved and what battles were worth fighting. And to find the answers, he would have to listen to God's prophets in the most godless place on earth, Babylon. Observing the written word in the process. And it is the same for us today in an equally hostile environment. If we want to know what God said, we have to study his testimony. It reads, I offered myself to the Almighty, my Lord and my upright one, to request either intervention and intercession through communication and contemplation, or the desire to be set apart as discriminating. This is tefillah. Either mediation and reasoning developed through the proper assessment of things. If it is from palal, to intervene, to mediate and arbitrate, assess, reason, and contemplate, and ta'ab, to desire it. Or if it's from pala as opposed to palal, then it means to be set apart, special, unique, devoted, and uncommon. It does not mean worship or prayer, however. That is not the basis of the word. While longing for a favorable outcome, this is takanun, desiring sympathy and compassion, mercy and kindness, longing to express a more favorable circumstance. And it's from ta'ab, to desire, and chanan, to seek forgiveness, empathy, mercy, and generosity, while abstaining from food in coarse and common clothing and ashes. Well, the ash part he may have had right in the sense that it is the ash of the Adam of Parah that is going to make a difference in the end. Anyway, this was Daniel, my God is judgmental, Daniel 9:3. The religious, by seizing upon the concluding portion of Daniel's statement and removing it from the context, will claim that God favored this man because he fasted. They may even claim that he was chosen because he was humble and he was wearing coarse clothing, common clothing. He wasn't all impressed with himself. He wasn't, dressed like me and $10 shirts and $5 shorts. Maybe he was. So what that statement actually conveys is that Daniel was religious about his diet. That's all it means. And that is one of the reasons that Daniel's not a prophet. He was a scribe. Now, also noteworthy, tefillah is the Hebrew word that is most often translated as prayer, a concept which isn't found in the Torah. God never instructs us to pray to him. And therefore, prayer cannot be among the requirements for participation in the covenant or for salvation. Prayer is so irrelevant that there is no mention of it on the 2 tablets. Yahweh carved with his own hand. God does not ask us to pray ever. And that is profound. Further, in Devarim 18, Yahweh goes beyond this to attest that those who insist on prayer are an abomination to him. Well, you would think that religious Jews who want to pray all the time would have actually read the Torah. They claim to be Torah observant. I guess they're lying. That said, as the exemplar of rabbinic Judaism and Roman Christianity, Daniel was likely praying. Even worse, he was addressing God using Satan's title, which is my Lord. It is as irritating as it is wrong, but it exists and it is repeated to drive this point home. One dode will make on God's behalf in a moment. Now, what Yahweh wants is for us to observe and then respond, listen and then speak. This also means that Paul's pray without ceasing is completely wrong and in total discord with Yahweh's instructions, as are the minions of Haredim bobbing their heads against the western wall. Further, the sinner's prayer prompted by evangelists as the basis of one's salvation isn't endorsed by God. There is no divine mandate for beginning or ending a meal with a prayer, and certainly not one for saying Amen, which is the name of an Egyptian god. Now, in this context, the traditional concept of prayer is awkward. Daniel would not have Bakash, sought and requested, searched for, or secured permission to pray, would he? And that's what the text reads. Well, not pray, but he was soliciting permission. They would never do that for prayer. He prayed so often that he was religious about it. And this is not to say that we should not talk to God. Adam did, Noah did, Abraham, Moshe, and Dode, as well as all of the prophets. but each of them listened to God first and foremost. The second most commonly translated word for prayer is palal, a term used in this next statement. And while it is found 8 times in the Torah, on each occasion, the act was initiated by men without direction or comment from God. Beyond this, it is actually more likely that tefillah, to be discriminating regarding the benefit of being set apart, is a compound of ta'ab, desire, and palah, to be set apart as special, unique, distinct, and devoted, distinguished, and uncommon. So this known palal, to think before intervening, the opening verb in the next statement, it reads, so I chose to assess the situation and contemplate the implications because I sought a way to intervene that would be justified. Wa palal. I wanted to develop the proper understanding of the agreement through open communication before requesting assistance and asking for help concerning and approaching Yahweh, my God. And I expressed my appreciation, acknowledging my familiarity with Yada, while attributing influential factors associated with knowing. I was thankful for the opportunity to know, from Yada, to know, recognize, acknowledge, and understand, and Yad, hand and influence. I said, I think that it is vital that you respond, my Lord and upright one, as the Almighty, regarding the immensely relevant, especially intense, and influential man, Ha-Gadol, who is respected for having closely examined and carefully considered, been completely observant of the covenant, and who demonstrated loyal love and devotion, who shows affection for the relationship in his granted favors, to those who appreciate and prefer what is his, as well as for those who approach by observing the instructive conditions pertaining to what he has offered and expects in return. Daniel, God is my means to judge, 9:4. Now, I've witnessed it so many times, I'm glad to have this message reinforced. Going off half-cocked, ready to change the world with just enough information to be dangerous is counterproductive. We're witnessing 2 people devoting their life to their animosity and utter stupidity, doing that now, making all sorts of absurd claims. But they don't have enough knowledge to be even dangerous other than to themselves. So even when we have invested the time required to be properly prepared, in my case, 24 years, we have to know which battles are worth fighting and which are not. You cannot respond to everything. There's not enough time in the day. You have to, and in our case in particular, our case is to make Israel aware of Yahweh's name and of the return of Dod, their Messiah, and the proper understanding and purpose of the Moed Mikre and the conditions of the covenant, as well as their timeline between now and then, so they know how much time they have for these events to transpire, so that they stop being religious and political and return to Yahweh. And so that's our priority. We can't fight every battle. So in this particular case, there is no benefit in debating the religious or engaging with the overtly political or the chronically stupid. No amount of evidence or reason is going to change their beliefs. So we just sometimes have to leave them alone. Now, we would all be wise to palal, rationally assess the situation and contemplate the implications to determine if intervention can be justified. And all the while, we should, express our appreciation, be thankful for the opportunity to know, because God has made that possible for us. Now, it is possible that Dod was singing the praises of his Lord in this statement, but if so, why? God did not inspire his prophets to tell him that he's wonderful. It is like us saying that the sun is bright. It's true, but what's the point? If you want to demonstrate your appreciation, accept the conditions of the covenant and attend the mikveh as they were prescribed. For example, if you were to write that you think I'm praiseworthy for having provided these 35 books that you see behind me, all free at yadayad.com, I'm going to immediately deflect the accolade because I'm uncomfortable with it. Other than I want you to acknowledge that Yahweh has enabled what you read, inspired what you have read and what you have available to you, so that you know it's appropriate for you to act upon it and capitalize upon what God has conveyed through them. But if you were to tell me, for example, on the contrary, that my son, you were impressed by him and his character and his intellect, as well as his decision to become a member of the covenant, well, I'd be thrilled. And the same is true with our Heavenly Father and his son. You want to talk about your love for Dode, appreciation of him fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, for all of the wonderful psalms that he wrote, and for his relationship with Yahweh and his willingness to share all of that with us. Go right ahead. God's going to receive that exceedingly well. So I embrace this approach to father and son in the way that I translated Yada, which is to know, and Gadol, a highly capable individual, and rendered it as if Daniel was speaking of Yada's recognition of Gabriel, who we know as Dode. And I am the first to deduce that, and it's inarguable. I am confident that Yahweh would be much happier with us when we acknowledged his great love, particularly for his son, and in this case, his son is Gabriel, the courageous and competent man of God. Moreover, in the 9th chapter, it is all about the Messiah, who is also Dode. And it is Gabriel who delivered these prophecies to Daniel. And it is Yada that is the first to explain this in a way that is coherent. And so now we know that Dode has done this for us, and he has served us in this regard. Is particularly important for us to appreciate and acknowledge his gift of life. It was indeed vital that Yahweh responded to the fallen state of his people and intervened in this way through his son. And this is the ultimate opportunity for reconciliation. And by having read Yirmiyah, Yashayah, and the Mizmor, Daniel would have known, as we do, that the means to restore the Bereth covenant would be through Hagadol, the immensely important, especially intense, courageous, capable, and very combative man who, Ha-Yare, is the one who should be respected and admired for having Chesed demonstrated his love and devotion to his people. Those who La Akabhu would come to appreciate and prefer him for what he would accomplish. You see, when this final remnant is prepared for Dode's and Yahweh's return, we're told in the 12th chapter of Zechariah that as Yahweh returns with Dode, they're going to look upon the one that they pierced, and they're going to cry, lament, tears of joy, really, as one would welcome home a firstborn. They're going to come to appreciate all that Dode has done, being crucified to fulfill Passover, having his soul carry our guilt into Sheol, to deposit it there, so that we might be perfected. And we will prefer him over all others. I do already. So do all members of the covenant family. I hope you come to that position too. So through this Gadol, the Messiah, Dode, the Shamar observant, would be reconciled by Mitzwahu, his instructive conditions pertaining to what he has offered and expects in return. So rendering Gadol in this way is consistent with Yeshaya 9, which takes precedence over Daniel 9. And while both men recorded prophetic events, one was a prophet and the other was not. It is like comparing Haggai to Moshe. However, Dode was a student of the Torah and its bereth, and thus observed what Yahweh created. Now, as God will demonstrate, Dowd is the exemplar of the covenant and the man we should respect as our Messiah, our shepherd, and the Lamb, as well as our most deserving king. Dowd, whose name actually means beloved, also embodies the devotion to the relationship that Yahweh cherishes. He's the exemplar of it. He's the enabler of it. So whether he knew it or not, he had written a marvelous introduction for Gabriel's arrival later within this chapter, setting us up to properly consider what is his announcement to fulfill the spring Mikre. And in these ways, as Daniel was insinuating, to know Yada is to know Dowd. One points to the other, and the lesser luminary reflects the king's brilliance. Although I may be reading into this what Yahweh intended, even if the man ensnarled in Babylon remained unaware, with the wayward scribe representing the ill effects of Judaism, he must be approached cautiously. So we have read things from him that those who know Yahweh would not say, but we've also seen Yahweh use these words to open our eyes to future events. The fact remains that until this chapter, and only after seeing it repeatedly used in Yirmiah, Daniel had not mentioned Yahweh's name. It's interesting, isn't it? He inappropriately referred to God as my Lord. He is more preoccupied with his personal situation than the actual prophets who wrote and spoke from Yisrael. Until this admission, where he read the answer, the man incarcerated in Babel did not comprehend anything he had seen and admitted it. Affirming his confused perspective, his only book, this is the only book partially written in another language, in this case, Aramaic, the language of Babylon. Rather than being a prophet, Daniel was visited by them. And it was not until after stumbling through the debacle of Daniel's chapters 1 through 6, which clearly were written by an unidentified narrator, and him saying so many inappropriate things, that we came to realize that the only prophets in this story appear in Daniel 7 through 12, and that they were revealed by the likes of Gabriel, Michael, and Elia. And the rest of it does not pass the Debatim test of authenticity. As for what follows, Daniel's reporting was correct. This issue was pervasive and deliberate, acting in the role of a court reporter after having heard the evidence found in Yirmiah, Yeshaya, Hosea, and throughout Dowd's Mizmor. He was appropriately attesting to their message, telling us what we need to know. He says, we have missed the way. Well, that was pretty obvious. You're slaves in Babel. Not a way to go, boy. And we are guilty of perverse corruptions and distortions. That's pretty obvious, too, of awa, twisting and perverting. And we have violated the standard. Well, Rasha, we have been especially religious, evil, wicked, unjust, immoral, unethical, inconsiderate, and invalid, because we have rebelled, marad. We have turned away from the terms and conditions of your relationship agreement, mitzvah ata, from offering from what you are offering and expecting in return, and also from your mitzvot, your means to make informed and rational decisions regarding the way to justify making good decisions and resolving disputes. This is Daniel 9:5. We, and we. There were 5 we's. Daniel was one of them, as corrupt and guilty as any of them. He was them. And that is the message of the first 6 chapters and the lingering effect of them. Dode, errantly known to most as David, wrote the definitive text on how to properly observe the Torah in his 119th Mizmor or Psalm. Throughout this lyrics, he drew our attention to mitzvah, terms and conditions of the relationship. Mishpat means used to resolve disputes and execute good judgment. It is therefore apparent that Daniel was familiar with Gabriel's song, even though he had not applied the message. As it relates to the mitzvah, which lead to the mishpat, there are 5 conditions which must be accepted to enter our Heavenly Father's home. First condition of the covenant is that we must walk away from politics and religion, from patriotism and conspiracy, as well as from social customs and traditions, from Babel, the corruptions born and bred in Babylon, from the Goyish king of Babel. And that is what Chata Awa, missing the way as a result of corruptions and distortions, is communicating in this self-assessment. Daniel recognized the importance of doing so, but yet had not taken this vital step to the extent necessary for him to serve as an actual prophet. Now, should you protest this assessment and claim that God could not use a man whose beliefs, testimonies, and deeds were opposed to him, then you may want to think again. He specifically said that he was using Nebuchadnezzar and that he anointed Cyrus to do as they would do and now have done. And both men have earned a trip to Sheol, hell. Yahweh created evil, and he uses it as he must, as a filter for free will. There's a lot of people out there that think they're speaking for God that are actually earning themselves a trip to Sheol and are part of the filter of evil that draws people away from the covenant. Now, second, we must come to trust and rely upon Yahweh. This necessitates knowing him and coming to understand what he's offering to be part of the covenant, both of which can be achieved by observing his Torah, and neither of which is possible prior to walking away from religion and politics, conspiracy. Third, Yahweh asks us to walk to him and allow him to perfect us. This process is fulfilled and facilitated by our response to his Moed Mikre, the 7 steps, which begin with Pesach and end with Sukkah, but particularly Dode's fulfillment of Chag Matzah, which is what he will present using the timeline here in the 9th chapter. Now, this serves as the basis of our mishpat, our decision on the means Father and Son deployed to resolve religious corruption. Fourth, to be part of the covenant, we are instructed to Shamar Bereth, to focus on the terms and conditions of the covenant. Therefore, our participation is facilitated and by closely examining, carefully considering the Torah, because it is the only place that these mitzvah, terms and conditions, are delineated. And of course, this brings us back to the Son, because he wrote the most definitive text on how to properly observe the guidance his Father was providing to us through the Torah in the 119th Psalm. And of course, fifth, to be part of the covenant, to be included within the Bereth. As parents, we are encouraged to circumcise our sons, showing our commitment to fulfill our most important mission in life. Our Heavenly Father wants to raise us to raise our children to become his children. And so that's the purpose of this instruction. So sadly, the religious seldom accept the Torah teaching. They prefer the deceptive and self-serving witness of religious and political men. They prefer the New Testament, the Talmud, and the Zohar, as well as the Quran. Echoing the sentiments of Yahweh and his prophets, Daniel admits that he was also part of the problem. I'll conclude this show on Daniel 9:6, and we'll pick it up at this point in our next program. We have not listened to your coworkers, the prophets, who, to show the way to receive the benefits of the relationship, communicated the word in your name to our leaders and to our social, military, and economic elite, to our forefathers, and also to all the people of the land. Israel, you have never listened to God. There are a few individuals who, for a brief time, have done so, but as a nation, as a people, never. And that's something you may want to change. I thank you for listening. Looking forward to be back with you as we continue through the book of Daniel. Good day.